Hey there, everybody, and welcome to day 3. We are going to talk about your purposes in action. So, before we talk about that, we want to talk about finding your why. I'm sure you've all heard about finding your why. Pretty much every single successful person out there talks about this. I never thought it was important, and it's one of those things I say here that I wrote it off for a very long period of time. But before we start taking action on what we did, we need to find our why, our mission statement. And this is one of those things, like I said, that I wrote off for a long time until I found my why, until I found how important it was to have a reason to do things. So this is all about your mission statement. Helping people make a dent in the universe is mine. I want to show people how to do what I did, basically. And because for a very long time I felt aimless, and I think this is kind of like having a mission statement, having something to work towards, or kind of like having an idea of what I want to do or what I want to change in the world. It's kind of been very, very helpful. And it's also given me, whenever I think about an idea, whenever I think about, doing something like starting another business or doing something else, I'm always like, is this actually going to help me get closer to this right here, helping people make a dent in the universe, or is it going to bring me farther away from this? And this is what's important to me right now. I think I say down here somewhere that, your mission statement throughout life can change, and it probably should change as well. As you learn new things, as you grow, as you change as a person, of course your mission statement could change. As I say here, I always felt aimless and small, like the things I wouldn't do would matter. It's funny because I worked in this industry where I had a marketing agency when I was younger, and I was actually very successful, but there were a lot of people around me at the time who were kind of like spinning their tires. There were a lot of people in the industry who were kind of capped out, meaning that they were making only a certain amount of money, and I'm not calling these people losers or anything like that, but I just didn't want to end up like these people, right? And a lot of them were in their like 50s or 60s, and they were kind of like struggling in the industry, and they were trying to be successful. And again, I'm not making a statement about them in a negative light or anything like that, but I just didn't want that. And I kind of felt like I was stuck spinning my tires at the time. And that's what I mean by I felt small at a certain point in my life. And it wasn't until I did like a bunch of stuff. I have here so many things, right? Which means it wasn't until I like explored a bunch of my, quote unquote purposes from the past exercise that we did yesterday. Go back to day 2 if you didn't do it yet. And it wasn't until I like went through a bunch of those things that I found my why, and I found kind of like what motivated me, and I found my story as well. So yesterday, I had you write down as many weaknesses as you could as well, or anything that made you feel weak. And I want you to look at that list and figure out, like, does anything stand out on that list? I would also say, are there any similarities that can help you develop a mission on that list as well? What I would say is that one of the things that is a weakness on my list, if you remember from yesterday, I said my grandfather, he used to call me later because I always used to say I wanted to do things later. But it was a weakness, and it was a weakness that I wrote down on my list. But what I found is that I really just needed to do things that motivated me. It wasn't that I was lazy. It wasn't that I like didn't want to do things. It was just that I wanted to do things that were important. I wanted to do things that mattered. I wanted to do things that made me feel like I was actually making progress and all this other stuff. Even to this day, I hate doing chores, right? Some people love doing chores, but I don't like doing chores. And that when I would say later, that's what my grandfather was referring to as the chores. But I just felt like they were unimportant. I felt like there were bigger things for me to do. And even to this day, I have a person who mows my lawn. I have a person who cleans my house and all this other stuff. But I worked for that because I realized that it wasn't part of my mission. So it's like when we have a mission, when we understand like what we're working towards, and it could be anything, by the way, then I feel like it's a lot easier for us to kind of like work backwards from there and to figure out what we want to do with our life. And so, that's why I think it's important to have a mission. And it's also important to say, like, what doesn't fit into the mission? Like, is like for me, it would be a waste of time for me to mow my own lawn, right? Because it's like there are other things that I do that are more important that get me closer to this goal right here. So again, I would look at any weaknesses and anything stands out. Your mission can change, as I've said, and it doesn't have to just be one thing. It can be about anything, and it doesn't have to include helping people. Again, I think a lot of people think that a mission statement has to be like, oh, I want to, help the homeless, or I want to help dogs, or I want to help this, that, or the other thing. And While I think that's a great goal and I think it's great to help people, I don't necessarily think it should be a mission unless you truly, truly feel it deep down inside. Again, I'm not against helping people or any of that other stuff, but is it truly what you want? Is it truly something that you want to do? If it is, like I said, great, include it. But I think our mission should be a little bit bigger than that. And here's the thing is that there's nothing wrong, like I said, with helping people, but I think a lot of people, when they think of a mission statement, they think it has to be something that helps people. But what you don't realize is if you have a bigger mission, like maybe you want to create the next SpaceX, like Elon, right? It's like you can help people through doing that. It's like if you built the next SpaceX, that would be amazing, number one. Number two, you would have a lot of money that would help you help other people. So it doesn't have to be like the main mission or the main part of a mission. It just has to be something that matters to you. I think that a few questions that you can ask yourself are like, what do you believe in most? What do you believe at this time could be the most important thing in your life? What can you talk about for hours as well? I would say, what are the things that you think about all day long? What are the things that you daydream about? What are the things that you could talk to anyone about for hours and hours on end? I would look at those things, and maybe you want to think about this for a day. It took me, I don't know, it took me a good amount of time to come up with my mission statement. There's no rush on this, and I think it's something that you can take your time doing. If you have a mission statement already, or if you have something close, then I would say you can skip this next step. But if you do not, I would say write as much as you can about what your mission could be, and I would get it all out on paper, everything positive, everything negative, everything you can think about. And then I would turn it into a sentence. You could be writing pages and pages and pages about what you think your mission is, and I would definitely say do that. Sometimes when we just get everything out on a piece of paper, then it becomes much simpler, and then I would try to reduce it down to a sentence, and that's what I would do here for the mission statement. So on to taking action. Now that you have a mission statement, it'll be easier to see what on your list lines up with your mission. So again, remember we had the list of where you circled your top 10 things from each list, and you also might have check marks or stars next to certain things. And I have here, side note, your mission can always change, so just remember that your mission can change. Yesterday, you should have come up with good ideas for a purpose, multiple ideas. Like I said, some things you circled, some things you starred, or, depending on whatever you wanted to use, stars or check marks or whatever. And the items you starred and circled, the similarities, should be most important to try first. So again, before we take action, I would look at those things that you circled and starred, because those are the things that were similar between all the lists. And you can take action on as many ideas as you wish. And I have here with one rule: give each item you want to try a dedicated effort. So let's say you have 3 or 4 similarities between your lists, where there are 3 or 4 things that you're interested in that are all similar. Number one, if you did your mission statement, or if you came up with a mission statement, that might narrow down the list quite a bit. But if it didn't narrow down the list, if you still have 3 or 4 things, then what I would say is try one thing at a time. And so taking action on a list is pretty easy, but it can be a little bit overwhelming. Again, maybe your mission is to start a restaurant, or maybe that was one of the similarities, that you love cooking, you want to start a restaurant. It's like, how do you go from where you are right now to starting a restaurant? Maybe, like I used the example earlier in the class, maybe you want a dog rescue. It's like, how do you go from where you are right now to starting a dog rescue? Maybe you want to be like Elon and you want to start the next SpaceX. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? You eat one bite at a time. So you have to start small. You have to break down your discovered purpose to bite-sized pieces. The other thing is like, what can you do today, right? Sometimes I think that this is a very scary question right here is, what could you do today that is based off of the one thing on your list? If you wanted to start a dog rescue, it's like, what's one thing that you could do today? I want you to think about that before we move on to the next slide. I'm kind of pausing here for a reason, because this is a very scary question. It's like, I remember when I started kind of working through a process similar to this, and I was like, oh my God, I have to start today. It became, kind of scary, but if something is truly your purpose, then you'll start today. Just to give you some examples, what I mean by breaking things down into a small bite-sized piece is, if you wanted to start a restaurant, for example, you could start cooking at your house, and you could charge your friends to come over and eat at your house. As I always say, if your friends aren't willing to pay for your food, then maybe you shouldn't start a restaurant, right? But if they are, then you just started a restaurant and you started it today. Maybe you could start doing prep for example, as well, where you start cooking out of your house and doing food prep for people. A lot of people always, whenever I say this stuff, people are always like, yeah, but there are rules and regulations and all these things. I'm like, yeah. There are rules and regulations to doing something like that. But at the same time, it's like these are things that you can figure out later. And what we're doing here is we're just looking to get started, and we're looking for the smallest piece. If I were to start something, by the way, just to give you an example as well, if I were to start doing food prep, I would just tell people that I'm starting food prep and asking them if they are interested. That would be the first smallest step. If people say yes, then you know you're onto something. If they say no, then you know you're not onto something. So that would be the smallest step. If I wanted to start a dog rescue, like using that example, I would maybe go volunteer at a dog rescue first. That would be the smallest step. So we're breaking things down to the smallest step possible. Some of you, again, it's like some of you might want to write a book, for example. Maybe that's on your list. I would just write one page, and I would just get started today. So it's like, what's one thing you could do today? Finally, what I would do here is, these are all ideas of things that I think people should do today to get started on a purpose. Number one, you could start a Facebook group or a Facebook page. Great way to, kind of talk about something that you are interested in. A great way to get things out into the world. You could start a YouTube or a podcast, of course. I am a big fan of YouTube, obviously, and I think it's a great way to get started on a purpose or one of your ideas. Start sharing it with the world. Really start any social media. I mean, TikTok is huge. There's a billion of them out there. So that's a great example as well. You can start a blog. I would also say find a position based off of one of your purposes. Like I said, if you're thinking about starting a dog rescue, go volunteer at a dog rescue. If you want to start a restaurant, go get a job at a restaurant, right? I think we should kind of like figure out if we actually like to do these things before we actually do them. And finally here, I have the most important one, which is document your learning process. This is probably the most important one. Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this, documenting your whole entire learning process of whatever it is that you're starting, and kind of sharing what you're learning. I think people think like they have to be an expert or something like that to be on YouTube or to have a blog, but you can just document the things that you're learning and share it with the world, whatever it is, whatever is on your list. I'm sure plenty of people in there will help you come up with ideas, but documentation is extremely valuable, and I think people don't realize how valuable it is for other people as well, to see you grow, to see you from beginning to end. So I would start documenting your learning process of whatever you feel your purpose is. And that's a great way to get started. If you are saying to yourself that you don't want to do one of these things, you either need to face your fear or it's not your purpose. So again, if you cannot start one of these things today, if you are coming up with an excuse, and yes, I'm calling you out right now, if you're coming up with an excuse and saying, I can't do this today, then I would say either it's fear, the fear of getting started, the fear of doing something, the fear of being wrong, or it's not your purpose. And I think you need to be honest with yourself. So I would be honest with yourself, and I would start recording or doing one of these things today, and I would just get it moving. One of the other things that I want to talk about real quick as well, and we're going to talk more about this in future videos. I'm kind of leaving it out of this one on purpose, but one thing is that, again, you probably have like 3, 4, 5, maybe more things on, similarities on your list here. I'm just going backwards to whatever day this was here. Day 2, but you probably have multiple things that are on those lists that you want to try. So again, the reason we're doing something like starting a Facebook page and talking about something is because it's a low barrier of entry, and also if you find yourself not running out of ideas, running out of things to talk about, then just move on to the next thing because it's probably not your purpose. I think YouTube or podcast is a great place to start, because the thing about YouTube is you can start maybe you think dogs are your purpose, or starting something about dogs is a purpose, but maybe there's something else as well that you want to talk about, like starting a restaurant. We'll just use that example. It's like you can start your YouTube channel talking about dogs, and if you find that you don't want to do it, then you can start talking about food, and maybe your food channel takes off. So don't be afraid to start something and then change later on. Again, that's why I said that you should give something kind of like, where did I put it here? Somewhere in here. I already lost it. That's why I was saying something about giving something a dedicated focus, giving it a certain amount of time. So that's going to be day 3. and I will see you tomorrow for day 4.